A few months before my daughter was born, we went to a warehouse for a pop-up sale of baby accoutrement, strollers and diaper bags, all the stuff you really need with a newborn. And the doors opened, and I went in, and I was instantly distracted, as of course I think any rabbi would be, by a 20-foot tall stack of books. A massive display of secondhand children's books, literally pennies on the dollar. And the very first book I ever purchased for my daughter came from this wall. It is called Vampirina Ballerina, which, as you might have guessed from the title, is about a little vampire girl who wants to grow up to be a ballerina. It is full of terrible vampire puns that are meant to amuse you, the grown-up, reading the book to the child who will understand none of them. I still read it to her, and when I do so, I do it in my best/worst Bela Lugosi impression. Why do I mention this? Because if I couldn't resist that book, how could I possibly resist on tonight of all nights not telling you all some spooky stories? But these are not just any spooky stories. These are spooky stories from the Talmud. And the first one is a ghost story. We find this text in Brachot 18b. Once upon a time, there was a pious man who gave a poor man a very generous donation on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. And the man's wife became furious with him. She mocked him, she scolded him, and he was so miserable with her taunting that he went to go find a place to sleep literally anywhere else. And as the new year began, he found himself sleeping by a fresh grave in the cemetery. He was awoken by two female voices. The first of whom said to the second, "My friend, let us roam the world once more and hear from behind the heavenly parochet, the heavenly curtain, what calamities will befall the living this year." Uh-oh, thought the man, I'm surrounded by ghosts. And the second spirit replied, I cannot. I am buried in a mat of reeds. Don't worry, I got distracted here too. I had to go do some research. Dr. Jonathan Boyarin of JTS tells us that this is the pauper's replacement for a shroud. So only the poorest of the poor would be buried in a mat of reeds, and perhaps this is why. Because over 2,000 years ago, maybe the tradition was that instead of giving honor to the dead, the reeds trapped the spirit in the earth. And so this poor, unfortunate, pauper girl says, "You go on," to her friend, the other ghost. "You tell me what you hear beyond the curtain." And so the first ghost comes and goes and says, there's bad weather. There's going to be bad weather. If you sow your plants early, hail will strike. And so as dawn came, the man returned from the cemetery, and as everyone else begins to sow their fields in the new year, he holds off until the second season. And sure enough, boom, terrible hail strikes and destroys all of that first season of crop, but the man and his family, his community, they're fine because he planted everything in the second part of the year. Rosh Hashanah arrives again. And this year, a little trepidatiously, the man decides to go back to the cemetery. Once again, the two ghosts speak to each other. "Come, let's go see the world." "No, I'm still stuck here. Come and tell me what's coming up." And once again, comes back the first ghost. "There's going to be a blight this year. You have to plant everything early. Everything needs to go into the ground early because a terrible disease is going to come and kill all the plants." And sure enough, as it is, the man plants all of his seeds early. He has a harvest, and the rest of his community is okay. Everyone is fine because of his good luck. But not everyone's so pleased. His wife is unimpressed. This is the same wife, of course, that screamed at him so badly he wanted to go sleep in the cemetery. She doesn't look so great in this ghost story. She says, "How are you so lucky? How did you know all of these things?" And he tells her the truth. "There's these ghosts. They tell me the things. There's one that goes. There's one that doesn't." And she goes to the market and she can't help herself. She runs into the mother of the poor dead girl, and she gets into a fight with her. She mocks her. She says, "Your daughter is stuck in a bed of reeds." And that year, when Erev Rosh Hashanah arrives, and the man this year is eager. He runs, he's punctual, he steals into the cemetery, he takes up his normal spot near the grave, he waits, he listens, the ghosts begin to stir. But before the first one can even ask her friend, "Do you want to go and see the world?" the second one just says, "No, leave me be. What we share from beyond the world is being heard by the living, and they have no gratitude, only scorn." The second story is a bit more ghoulish. The original comes from Tractate Kabbalat and stars a well-known figure for all of us, Rabbi Akiva. And this version of the story is adapted by Dr. Rabbi David Shoyevitz of Northwestern University. And it so happens once, so goes this tale, that Rabbi Akiva was passing through, you guessed it, a cemetery. And he came upon a man who was, 1, naked, and 2, stained black as coal, and 3, carrying a gigantic basket of thorns atop his head, collecting all the spikiest branches from around the cemetery. And Rabbi Akiva realized that the man was dead and yet still working as though he was alive. And more than that, he inferred that the thorns that the man was collecting were the fuel that was being used to turn him black as coal. And the man admits to Akiva, "Yes, I am dead, but every day I am sent forth from the afterlife to go and chop trees." And Rabbi Akiva said to him, "My son, what was your profession in the world from which you came?" And the man replied, "I was a tax collector for the Romans. And more than that, I was corrupt. I only favored the rich. I actively oppressed the poor." And Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Is there anything you have ever heard in the world to come about how you might escape your punishment?" And the man began to cry. "Oh, it's impossible. I heard only one thing, and it's an impossible thing. My tormentors tell me if only this poor man had a son who in front of the entire kahal would lead them in prayer and then have them say, 'Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach,' then I would be released from my punishment. If only someone would say Kaddish for me. If only my son would lead the congregation in Kaddish." And so Akiva set out to help the man who is trapped between life and death, but the town people are unimpressed. They say, "No, the man was a jerk. The man was a tax collector. He was evil, he was corrupt, and more than that, his son rejected us. He joined the Romans. He has never learned a thing of Judaism, and more than that, his evil father did not even bring him into the covenant, did not even perform the mitzvah of Milah for him. He's at step negative 100. He's not even at step 0, he's at step negative 100. But Akiva refused to give up. He found the boy, took him under his wing, personally tutored him, and even brought him to the moil. But it was not enough. The boy was somehow unable to learn the lessons of the great rabbi. Akiva would put a book in front of him, but he would not accept it, and so Akiva would fast. And he fasted for 40 days, and a bat kol, a heavenly voice, came forward and said, For him you fast? You teach my Torah to intercede on the behalf of sinners?" And Akiva still would not be swayed. He beseeched God for assistance, saying simply, "Open this child's heart, even one crack." And in that moment, there was just enough of the change in the boy that he could learn an aleph from a bet. And in that moment, Akiva grabbed him and brought him to the congregation to lead him in Kaddish. And as the boy prayed, the tale goes, the scent of fire being extinguished filled the entire synagogue as the coal-black man was finally put to peace. And the final story this evening comes to us from Tractate Gittin, and it is fantastical. It is about King Solomon. Solomon was asked to build the temple in Jerusalem by God, but he is in a bind. He has to find a mystical beast called a shamir, because only the shamir can cut the stones that will make up the temple, because God has forbidden weapons, sharp iron weapons, from being able to build the house of peace. And only one being in the world knows where to find the shamir, and that is Ashmodai, the king of the demons. So Solomon forges a magic chain, and Solomon forges a magic ring, and Solomon's agent captures Ashmodai, and then they find the shamir, and Solomon is victorious, and they order the king of demons brought back to Jerusalem, and soon the temple is being constructed, and in its beauty and its glory, Solomon gets arrogant. He turns to the king of demons, who's now powerless, and he says, "Why does the Torah describe you creatures as better than us, as more powerful than us?" And Ashmodai says to him, "If you let me out of this chain and you let go of your ring, I'll show you." And foolishly, Solomon frees him from the trap, and instantly the demon king seizes him, and he grows so large, the Talmud says, that one wing touched earth and the other wing touched heaven itself, and then he threw him 400 miles. But that's not all. The king of the demons stole Solomon's form. What happens next is a very rabbinic version of the 1973 horror classic, The Exorcist. And if you want to know how this spooky story ends and how Solomon was returned to his throne, 9 a.m. tomorrow, Torah study. I'll see you then. A cliffhanger. The point, though, our Jewish tradition is rich in stories of spooky spirits and things that go bump in the night. But what I also hope you heard is that the Jewish versions of these stories don't exist just to shock us or terrify us, but to remind us of fundamental ethical lessons and proper moral action. The man in the cemetery eavesdropping on the ghosts, that glimpse of the future he receives, that is a reward for his kindness to the poor. But instead of being satisfied with his miracle, he starts to plan his entire life around it, both figuratively and literally. He chooses to spend Rosh Hashanah in the cemetery. He would rather spend the New Year with the dead than with the living. And that's not how we're supposed to be. And Rabbi Akiva, who will one day be martyred by the Romans, spends his precious time and energy aiding the Jewish people who have allied themselves with his oppressors. And whether that is the tax collector who turned his back on the community, or the assimilated child who never even had a chance, he never allows himself to lose sight of his love for his fellow Jews, or to be at peace with their suffering. He even holds God to task, once more lifting up this beautiful tradition of the Jew as the child of Abraham, who intercedes on behalf of the wicked with God. Ultimately, and I would say perhaps somewhat ironically, our Jewish people don't need horror stories to be reminded of all the things that can go wrong in the world. You can just open up a history book and see that. But we are fascinated by these kinds of stories, and rather than not have them, because I think that would be impossible, human beings love a spooky story. Jews and Jewish horror stories are actually, secretly, ultimately, stories about hope. They're stories about redemption. They're stories about morality. And ultimately, they are one more tool in the toolbox that reminds us how to stick together as a community and how to be a mensch. Shabbat shalom.